Hello, today we're going to be talking about the cartridges that go into either the Stirling 51 or the Stirling 43. Today we have my Stirling 51 here, and of course the machine comes as standard with a 6-bladed cylinder. That's a really good standard cylinder, and we'll look at that in more detail in a minute. But the big advantage of the Stirling is the fact that I can interchange these cartridges and put any one of these cultivation or cutting cartridges in a very short period of time. I'm going to show you how that happens, and all I need to do is lift these two tabs, disengage the drive, and then I'm able to pull the mower blades out, and then I can easily take, for example, the Scarifier cartridge, and I can just drop that straight in and lock it off. It's always best to lock it off first, and then I'm ready to go again. So the really big advantage of this is that I find is that while I'm mowing, I might decide that actually I want to scarify a certain area of my lawn, and because I can do this so quickly, I do. And my lawn only benefits from these treatments because I do them, and the more often I do them, the better the lawn's going to look. Let's take a look at the 6-bladed cartridge that comes as standard with the Stirling. And to get a closer look at it, of course, I can drop it out really quickly and take a closer look at it. So this is the one that I use on my lawn, so it's had quite a lot of use already. But the Ultra Change cartridges are a little bit more robust. So I've got a thicker 6mm thick blade, and that's made out of some really special materials to make that hard. And the same applies to the 6 blades on the cylinder as well. These are all special steels, and they're also heat treated. The reason they need to be really hard is we need to keep a sharp edge as long as we possibly can, and also by making the blade stronger, they're less likely to chip or bend when you hit stones, which is sort of inevitable. Where do those stones come from on the lawn? That's the question I always have, but they always seem to appear. And the shore blade that we fit onto this, like I say, is incredibly hard, and of course that is where the shearing action occurs between the rotating cylinder blade and the actual solid shore blade on the underside. To get it adjusted, this is really ideal if I can get a blade that cuts grass really cleanly and it really has, I'm going to say, no contact here. And the adjustment is all done on the screw settings just here, which adjusts the cylinder down to the bottom blade. Although it's always really nice when you can show these mowers cutting paper, it really illustrates the scissor action. Depending on the type of grass that I have and the time of year that it is, I don't actually need to have the cylinder that tight as long as it cuts the grass cleanly. So I always adjust it as lightly as I possibly can, but at the same time knowing 100% that it's cutting and shearing the grass completely cleanly. This 6-bladed cylinder really cuts well, and it mows down to 5mm height of cut, and that is adjusted on the Stirling with this very clear height adjustment just here. If I use the right hand scale, I can choose exactly how many millimeters height of cut that I can select. In certain types of grasses, the grass benefits from a scalping operation, and scalping means that you take the grass down really, really low, and it's normally part of a renovation process. And by taking the grass down low, it means that when I do any cultivations or overseeding, that the blades of grass are not getting in the way of the debris throwing into the grass box, and it's not stopping the blades from going down into the thatch layer. So I can use this down to 5mm high, and it's really surprising how cleanly that cuts the grass down very, very low. Another practice that I like to follow as well is, in order to keep the blades really sharp, and remember these aren't sharp like knives, what they are is really sharp corners that are working together to actually shear the grass, is using a backlapping operation. And we have a video on that that shows in detail how you backlap, and with a 24mm socket on a power drill, I can turn the cylinder not in the cutting direction but in the backwards direction. That's where the backlapping comes from, and I can use a grinding paste which I apply with a brush, and I slowly turn that backwards, and what it does on the rear edge of the blade, it puts it really square, and also on the bottom blade as well, and that just means that I can keep a really sharp edge and absolutely minimal contact, and at the same time cut the grass as cleanly as I can so that the injury site is as minimal as possible. So that's the 6-bladed cylinder. I think you'll all enjoy that in this mower, and you'll really get a super clean cut with it. So these are the grass clippings that I've just cut now with the 6-bladed cartridge. The clippings you can see are quite long. I'm looking at 10 to 12mm, and that's quite a lot of grass because I'm mowing at 15mm high. So sometimes I'm taking sort of 50% of the grass plant off at any one time, which is too much. You know, we should be cutting at a third of the grass plant off at any one time. So these are the 6-bladed cylinder handles along the grass clippings really well, and you can see that it throws it all into the back of the box. So we're going to tip this out now, and then we'll compare this with the other uprisings that we get from other cartridges. So if I really want to scalp the grass down as part of my cultivation techniques, or if I want to maybe overseed, or in certain types of warm season grasses, a good scalp every now and again seems to benefit the grass. So first thing I've done is taken the actual comb off the front of the machine. This will dig into the ground because I'm now going to be mowing so low that this would just dig into the ground, and the roller will just spin. So 13mm spanner, and remove the screws on both sides, put them back in the rake so that you can find them when you come to put it back on again. Next thing I'm going to do is lower the height of cut down to 5mm, and I'm going to be using this green scale on the right hand side. I'm not going to be using the cultivation scale that is in white. I'm going to turn the speed down to slow, so that I'm going to go 1 click of 9. So from off position, I'm just going to take it 1 further click, and then what I'm going to do is start the blades, and off we'll go. So now you can see that's really scalped down. This is 15mm high. This is down at 5mm high, so taking 10mm off. And now that's really made it easy. If I'm going to cultivate or overseed now, it's really made it easy to be able to get the seed to contact the ground. If I want to mow lower than 5mm and scalp it even further down, then I'll need to use the 10-bladed cartridge, which we'll talk about later. And that 10-bladed cartridge, because the blade is slightly thinner at the front, means that I can mow that down as low as 3mm high. So this is the 6-bladed cylinder, really good at handling larger quantities of grass, really throwing it into the back of the grass box. But what happens is that as you start to get lower, you start to get a washboarding effect where you can see each blade coming and taking a cut at a distance of about 1 centimetre. That's not apparent, and you get a smoother cut when you're above 15mm. So if I'm going to be mowing really low and I want a really smooth finish, then the option is to go for the 10-bladed cutting cylinder. If I take this out, and just lay it down for comparison. You can see the blades are much closer together because it's the same diameter cylinder, and it still has a shore blade system, but this is the sports blade. Now, because you're going to be cutting lower with a 10-bladed cylinder by definition, the same thickness of blade is just shaved off at the front, machined off at the front here, which now gives us a blade at the cutting point of 3 millimeters. So I can go really, really low with this. So that's particularly good if you're a bowling green or a cricket wicket mower, then that really helps to get, of course, to the lower heights of cut that this one can't quite achieve. The 10-bladed cylinder, like I say, gives a smoother finish at the lower heights of cut. But again, if you want to scalp even lower than 5 millimeters, then of course you'd use the 10-bladed cylinder. Now, normally I would keep my 10-bladed cylinder for absolute best, so I want to keep it sharp. And of course, while you're scalping, you're much more likely to pick up soil or stones that weren't normally caught by your mower at your normal mowing height. And I'd really be reluctant to damage or blunten this cylinder if I can possibly avoid it. But let's show the mowing with this. So these are the contents of the grass box when using the 10-bladed cylinder. And actually, although it's just grass clippings, by definition, if I'm mowing lower, I need to mow more regularly, so I really am cutting short grass shorter. Third of the grass plant height rule, if I'm mowing at 10 millimeters, I need to mow the grass when it gets to 15 millimeters, back down to 10 millimeters again. So my grass clippings will be much shorter than the normal with a 6-bladed cylinder. So much finer grass clippings altogether, and I'm just going to empty those out next to the 6-bladed cartridge. You'll see as well, this is a little bit darker. I've just treated the lawn with iron, so actually I'm mowing now, because I'm mowing lower, I'm mowing more moss, dead moss, which is black, and so it's making that appear darker in colour. So scalping with a 10-bladed cylinder at 3 millimeters high, and I've removed the rake because the rake will just dig into the ground at these really low heights of cut. I'm going to leave the grass box off so you can see the grass that's coming out. And now you can see, taking that down even lower, down to 3 millimeters high, really there's very little remaining grass, and it's only the grasses that are lying flat which are still there. If you're going to buy one cultivation cartridge to go into the Stirling mower, I really strongly urge you to go for this one. This is called the Scarifier cartridge, and it's made up of lots and lots of little thin springs. These springs are absolutely ideal when spinning at high speed. If you set the height of cut high so that these are just touching the surface, then if you need to collect leaves or debris that's on the surface of the grass, then this collects everything and throws it into the grass box. Really good for cleaning up the grass. But its main purpose is for thatch reduction actually in the grass itself. So also for moss, if you have strong moss on your lawn, then it's really good to treat that with iron, and then once it's gone black, as you can actually see here, this has been very recently treated, and so now I'm going to be scarifying in order to remove that moss. So why do we actually need to reduce the thatch layers? So underneath this grass, a good healthy sward will be producing thatch, and the thatch is the dead material, the sheaths of the grass of the plants, the roots, and it creates that spongy feel to the grass. A little bit of thatch, a quarter of an inch, 6 millimeters up to 10 millimeters absolute max. It does offer some advantages to the grass, but really we do need to just keep on top of that. The thatch layer is, I like to refer to as a sponge, and that sponge sits just underneath the grass, and that is absorbing water and nutrients. So if it absorbs the water and the nutrients, the grass plant itself doesn't send its roots deeper, because the roots can stay in the surface, get all the nutrients and moisture that it needs at certain times of year. The water doesn't go through the thatch quite so easily. The roots don't go chasing after the water. If I can reduce the thatch layer, there'll be less sponge to hold the water, and the water will be encouraged to go down deeper, and the roots will chase after it. If you are prone to having drought conditions in the summer, then it's much better if your grass plants have deeper roots, because there's more moisture down there. If they've been encouraged to stay shallow, then as soon as it goes dry, the thatch, like a sponge, dries out really quickly, and the roots are left in what is a dry zone, because they don't have any deeper roots to be able to go and get any moisture. So we really need to keep on top of this thatch layer. The other thing the Scarifier does is, because the tines are so very close together, just 6 millimeters apart, then what we can do is, with the grasses that are growing flat on the ground, the Yorkshire fogs, the annual meadow grasses, what I can do is I'm combing the grass actively with power, and so it makes the grass stand more upright. And if I then mow afterwards, then I can get the grass so it's much more all at the same height, and less of the grass is lying down, which always looks less attractive. So there are three main questions that we get asked about the Scarifier cartridge. Number one is, how often should we scarify? Well, actually, if you're on, there's no fixed answer to that, because it depends how much thatch you've got. It depends how quickly your lawn is actually producing thatch, and how much can you take out at a time. But it also might depend on how often you have wheelie bin collections, because there's a lot of material that comes out of the grass and you can only fill the wheelie bin. So why take out any more than the guys take away from the council? So we say, actually, the cartridge is very, very gentle. It does stress the grass plant out slightly, so it's really important that the grass plants have moisture. So the grass needs to be nice and green, it's got plenty of moisture, and it needs to be well nutrients, good fertilizer levels as well. And that way, when you stress the plant out, it can recover quickly. By using this weekly, I'm not going to set it quite so aggressively. I'm just going to be combing the grasses upright and try and get a really nice clean cut with vertically standing blades of grass. The next question is, that we're asked very often, is actually, how deep should we set it? And again, I can't give you a definitive answer. So it depends on a lot of factors. It depends on actually how much thatch you've got. It depends on how long your grass is. And it also depends on how much material you can actually handle that comes out of the lawn. So maybe do it more regularly. But the whole ALLETT principle is about treating your lawn a little and often. So don't be afraid to go shallow, and do it more often. The machine and the cartridge are both very, very quick. So you can use this a little and often, maybe even weekly if you have the time, to be able to just take a little bit of thatch out every time and stand the grass up. The depth that I recommend is actually when I put the wheelie bin at one end of the lawn. If I do a there and back, I've got a full grass box that I can empty into the wheelie bin. That way I get the job done quickly, and I'm more likely to do it more often, which is better on the little and often principle. But you can set it deep, And you can, of course, with the Stirling, slow the machine right down. But deeper doesn't always give you a greater uplifting of the thatch. And the reason for that is, as the spring becomes under more load, the spring bends back. So instead of entering the ground and flicking like this, it starts to flick with a backward inclined tine. And that tine doesn't fetch out as much material if you set it down too deep. So the advice is start higher, set it at 5mm above the ground level, and see how that goes. If you think you want to take out more material, lower it down 2 or 3mm at a time until you're getting what is the optimal amount of material, and that will depend on your lawn and will also depend on how much material you can handle. The third question that we're asked is, should I mow before or after I scarify? And again, I'm going to be really vague on this. If you mow first and scarify second, the shorter grass allows the scarifier to either work more deeply and also to be able to throw the grass, the uprisings into the grass box better. It definitely gives great advantages to that. So mow first and you'll get better results from the scarifier second. But as I was talking about earlier, one of the really nice things about this, the close spacing of the tines makes the grass stand upright. And when the grass stands upright, you'll see different lengths of grass. So if you mow after you've scarified, then you take off all those blades of grass. And for example, annual meadowgrass seed heads as well are also taken off so that we remove those from the lawn as well, and so they're not going to seed later. So in an ideal world, you'll mow first, scarify second, and then mow again. It depends how much time you have. But maybe what you do is every other week, what you could do is mow first or mow last, and then get advantages of both situations. So let's have a look at how this is going to work in this iron-treated lawn full of moss. So here we have the material that's just been fetched out of the sward from the Scarifier cartridge. Set the cartridge at 0, just slightly below actually, and you can see here, because the lawn has recently been treated with iron, that it's a darker material, but there's a lot of moss in here, there's a few plants as well. And of course, if we're taking out all of this dark material, whether it be dead leaves or whether it be dead moss, then ultimately your lawn ends up looking greener because it's only the green leaves that are left and the darker materials are out. So ultimately it will end up making your lawn look greener and more lush. So here we are. That's the material that's come out from the Scarifier. I'd like to talk to you about the use now of the Verticut cartridge. And the Verticut cartridge is this one. These are driven star-shaped blades which cut into the grass sward. I always call this my second favourite cultivation cartridge. It shouldn't really be called that, but the Scarifier cartridge with the spring tines is such a versatile cartridge doing everything. But the Verticut cartridge does something that the Scarifier cartridge doesn't do. The Scarifier cartridge is very gentle and fetches out the loose material. But if I really want to sort my thatch out, then I need to start to cut into it. And these solid spring steel blades will spin at high speed and effectively saw a slot. And as you move forward, you then have a continuous slot through the thatch, which is helping the drainage. And by drainage, I mean that if I can create a slot through the thatch, then again, what I'll do is let the water get through the thatch, get through to the soil. It will go down in the soil and the roots will naturally chase that moisture and the nutrients that are down below. By sawing a slot as well, I actually have to remove the material that I cut into that slot, and these blades will throw the material well into the grass box, the material that it actually removes from that slot. So we are reducing thatch as well, but it's also allowing the air to get into the thatch, and like with the compost heap, getting air into the compost heap makes that break down as well aerobically. So otherwise it can cause problems if that thatch layer becomes a rotting compost heap rather than one that's breaking down into something that is probably more useful to the plant itself. So the questions we get asked about this is, how often should we use it? Again, it's pretty gentle, but that depends on how deep you set it. So in the Stirling, this Verticut will actually cut at -10, so we can actually achieve quite some depth with this. I like that from the point of view of overseeding. So if I was going to be overseeding, particularly in a ryegrass sward for a springtime seeding, then by cutting in, it does allow the space that when I then broadcast seed, that I've got a real opportunity to get the seed to touch soil, and I need it to do that so that it can start to absorb moisture and start its germination journey. And by cutting in deeper, then I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to get more seed deeper, which is a better place for it to be, down at 10 millimeters rather than just sitting on the surface where the birds can pick up the seed. The other thing that it does, and a lot of people are using it for this, is that when you have the flat growing weed grasses, that we're trying to create an environment, it's very difficult to kill those grasses, but we are trying to create an environment where they have a less competitive advantage. The grasses we want, the fescues, the bents, the ryegrasses, generally are growing upright, and then as the blade passes through, it doesn't do anywhere near any damage to those plants. You will find a few of those plants in the grass box, but really it's not very many, it's mainly thatch. But the grasses that are growing flat from a crown, the annual meadowgrass in particular, but also the Yorkshire fog, they really don't enjoy having a good verticutting. It's cutting their leaves off, it's exposing the soil around the plant, and it gives the opportunity for the grasses that we really want to fill those gaps and give them that competitive advantage that we're trying to create. So a regular treatment with the Verticut, not necessarily going so deep, you can raise it up a bit so it just gets the grass plants, will help in the control of those weed grasses and other broadleaf weeds as well. If you're reluctant to use chemicals on those broadleaf weeds, it will help with that too. So a great tool for all of those things. Gentle. How deep should you go? Just go as deep as necessary. Start off high if you want to create better results, and go deeper into the thatch because it's thatch reduction. Go to the 10 millimeters. Just be careful how much damage you're doing to the grass, and it definitely has to be optimal growing conditions. Lots of water, and make sure that you fertilise directly afterwards as well, so the plant's got the maximum advantage to be able to recover from the stress situation that you've just put it into. Speed of use, again, I would use the Stirling lower speeds for this as well, and give the blades a really good chance to cut in, but also to remove the material from the slot so the slots stay open for longer. You will see the lines when you're working deeper that this creates, so you're not going to do this before your show day of your lawn if you have a party or something like that, because you will see the lines. But set it shallow and you can hardly see where the lines have been at all. Great for standing the grasses, long grasses upright and just before mowing. So a question we're commonly asked as well is, do you use the Verticut before or after mowing? I'm going to be very prescribed about that. If you Verticut first, then when you mow afterwards, you clean up the sward, but you also catch the long grasses that you didn't get before because they're now standing upright. So Verticut first, and you get the advantage of getting the actual long grasses. If you mow first, then Verticut after, then you get cleaner slots, and you can get that material into the grass box easily because the longer grass isn't holding back the uprisings going into the grass box. So you could do this several ways. If you have a lot of time, you can mow Verticut and then mow again. But I would suggest if you mix it around so that on alternate weeks you might verticut first and then mow, and then switch it around so that you mow and then verticut in the next week, and that way you gather all the advantages. It really depends on how much time you have available. So let's get this into the machine, and let's have a look at what that does and see what comes out of the turf. And let's show you what those blades look like. So you can see here, this is the material that's come out from the Verticut, and you'll notice compared with the Scarifier, which really just brings out the loose brown material, whether it be moss or thatch, this is pulling a few plants out as well, and that thinning process gives the plants the space to be able to breathe. If you're looking at the slot itself, especially in the Stirling where we can go 10mm deep, then you're really getting a very significant slot into the thatch, allowing that to breathe and also get the CO2 exchanges in the soil. This extra depth that we're gaining now with the Stirling, with the Verticut at these sort of depths, really does create a great environment for grass seed to be able to germinate in a much better situation than if it was just on the surface itself, and of course it does keep it away from the birds too. Let's talk about the Dethatcher cartridge for the Stirling mower. And as you can see, this is now a much more aggressive blade. It's the most aggressive cartridge that we have in the range. A hook-shaped blade, which means it grabs the material out of the slot that it's cutting and really throws it to the back of the grass box. The blades are much wider spacing, and with that we are able to go into the ground more deeply. If the blades are spaced close together, it will tend to lift out all of the turf. So by going to a wider spacing, it allows us to go deeper and to be more aggressive. That doesn't mean that you can't use this in multiple different directions to go really deep, but this now is not part of our little and often. This is a part of our let's be really aggressive in springtime when the grass is all just waking up and we want to try and get the drainage going after a winter, or in the autumn time to prepare it for winter at the end of the season. So we're cutting a deeper slot at 14mm deep. We're really emptying out the slot as well because of the hook-shaped blade. And the combination of those things means that we really start to get into the thatch layer. We start to let the water be able to get through the thatch, which is what we want for better drainage, and not leave our lawns all wet and squishy with the thatch over the winter time, to give our lawns the best possible chance of looking good during the winter time. It's also great for overseeding, again because of the more aggressive slot. The slot is actually wider and more open, but because of the spacing you will need to do multiple passes in different directions, and a diamond pattern is actually the most popular because it gives the best possible coverage of slots before we then broadcast our seed. So let's take a look at this in action in the machine. So if we now look at the material that's coming out of the Dethatcher, you can see this is a real plant remover, really giving space for new plants to come in there. And there's also soil in here as well, just by virtue of the depth that we're working at. And the slots now are really impressively deep, right into the thatch layer, allowing us to get air into that thatch layer to start to get it breaking down. And also, of course, we've removed thatch and moss and got that into the grass box to get it away from the lawn itself. So this will really be cutting now, not just into the stolons of the grasses that grow on the surface, but also starting to get into the rhizomes, which are growing under the surface. And out of those, that just encourages new growth as well, to be able to get the plants growing. And you'll see new fresh plant populations come out of these slots in the future, especially if it remains warm, it's irrigated, or we've got good rainfall, and of course the all-important nutrients that we need as well for the plant to thrive. So within the interchangeable cartridge system, the ultra change system, we also have a lawn brush. So let's have a look at that and how to use it. This is the lawn brush out of the ultra change cartridge system for the Stirlings. And one thing that you may notice if you're a Kensington or Liberty user, this brush is a much stiffer, more aggressive brush altogether. It doesn't mean that it needs to be aggressive all the time, because that's about partly to do with the depth. So again, what depth setting should I set it at? Actually, it depends on how long your grass is. So the brush is used for, you can brush out thatch, and we'll show it working deeply to do that. But you could also, if the lawn's left untidy after doing particularly the dethatching operation, you could use the brush or the Scarifier cartridge to clean up after that. I like to use the brush sometimes in the summer where the grass doesn't actually need cutting. So what I might actually do is use the brush just to help brush the grass upright, and then lay it back down with the roller and put in a nice strong stripe without actually cutting the grass itself. You can also use this for brushing in top dressing. So if you're doing a levelling operation, I'm putting lovely dry sand into a dry sward, then this brush spinning at high speed will help brush the material forwards until that material finds a hole or a hollow for it to go into, that then doesn't get brushed as you continue to go forward. So nice for levelling there. And if you have a really short sward and you are affected a lot by worms, especially in the autumn time, then the worm casts, the casting worms, cause those little coins of soil which never seem to quite recover well, and also give an opportunity for weed grasses to get into. By using this regularly, then it will help disperse those soil spots that the worms bring up in their casts. So it's quite a useful cartridge to have for lots of different purposes. It's not the one that you're going to put on the top of your list, but if you've already bought the other cartridges, it's like with all armaments, you are properly armed to handle all types of situations. So let's take a look at this cartridge in operation in the machine. So the brush cartridge does a really great job of just picking out the brown material in the grass. And the reason it does that is because the bristle tine itself can't pick up any plants and put them into the grass box, and it doesn't cut into the soil, so you're not getting any soil in there at all. It's just brown, loose, dead material, and it's really ever so effective. My word of warning with the brush, as with all brushes, it's spinning around really quite quickly, so really just use it over the surface once, otherwise it can burn the leaves of the grass plant. Secondly, if you set it too deep, it really does pull the machine along, and in fact you don't really need to use the rear roller drive because the brush is pulling the machine along. But the other thing about being setting too deep is the bristle itself needs to be targeted at where the debris is, and if you allow the bristle actually to bend too far back as it's brushing, then you will start to get breakage of the bristle itself. So please just pay special attention to make sure that this cartridge lasts you as long as possible before you have to replace the bristles, that you don't set it unnecessarily deep. And with brushes, deeper isn't always best, because if it's brushing with just the bristle like so, it actually is much more effective than if the bristle, you're trying to pick up the material with the back of the bristle itself. So just some words of warning on that. Please set the depth so it's getting your target debris and really cleaning up. It's a fantastic clean-up tool, this one. So here's the debris here. You can see very few leaves in it at all. So let's take a look at the Aerator cartridge now. The Aerator cartridge is unusual within the range. There's no drive sprocket at the side here, and this set of blades here are not driven. They're not rotating, being driven by the motor that normally drives the cylinder or the reel of the mower. And the whole idea of this one is that once it's fitted into the mower, you're just going to use the rear roller drive, and the rear roller drive will push this along, and these blades will sink into the ground. With the Stirling we get additional depth, and these blades are now going in 14 millimeters deep, and they're going to poke little holes into the soil to allow nutrients and water to get down deeper into the soil rather than sitting on the surface. And of course that's really advantageous to the grass. Now if you want an opinion, I can use this cartridge whenever I want. Nobody will ever know that I've been over the lawn, so I can use it as often as I like. You can't tell that it's been over because you can't see the slot through the grass. So that's a really great advantage of it. It is extremely gentle, and there are certain times when the thatch is in a certain condition, and especially in warmer seasons as well, where what you need to do is to actually poke holes into a coconut husk type thatch in order to let the nutrients go down before I can start to use any more of the more aggressive types of cartridges. Certainly the Dethatcher would be too aggressive in that instance and would just damage the grass too much. So this is really gentle, but from my point of view, once I've got a grass sward that is looking really quite nice, then when I'm spending time doing work on the lawn, I really need it to be as effective as absolutely possible. And when I'm using other cartridges, they will also do a lot of what this will do, but in a more continuous cut line. So there are certain circumstances where the Aerator cartridge is really great, but as far as cultivation cartridges are concerned, in terms of, if you like, the amount of reward that you're going to get for your effort and your time, then you'd be better spent using it on the Dethatcher or the Verticut or the Scarifier cartridge. But it's still a great tool to have in the armoury for certain conditions. Let's have a look at it in action. So let's have a quick recap of the Stirling 51 and 43's cartridges that go in to this machine to make it the most versatile lawn care system on the planet. First of all, green material, standard grass clippings, the standard 6-bladed cartridge that comes with every Stirling. The short blade system is really rigid and robust. The blades are very hard and have a good, long, sharp life. The grass clippings with the 6-bladed, because we're mowing at anywhere normally between 15mm and 50mm, the maximum height of cut, the grass clippings will generally be longer because of the third of the plant rule for cutting. The grass clippings are by definition longer. So a great standard cartridge, really flexible for most lawn applications. We then go on to the optional cartridges, and this is the 10-blade cutting cylinder. The 10-blade cutting cylinder is for much finer cutting at lower heights of cut. The grass clippings that we have here are much shorter, because at 15mm cutting, I'm definitely going to be cutting at 20mm when the grass is at its longest, so the grass clippings are going to be 5mm or shorter generally. The first cultivation cartridge you should buy is the next one, and that's the Scarifier. The Scarifier springtime blades are extremely durable. It doesn't matter whether there's stones or roots, these blades will not catch. They will just flex out of the way. It's really quite a foolproof cartridge. Even if you set it in too deep, you're not going to do any damage. And the material that we see here is basically the loose material, the moss, the thatch that it fetches out, and these little tines are extremely close together. Great clean-up tool. If I wanted to clean up this blossom or leaves or just debris on the surface, it's absolutely great for doing that and just removing that dead material and leaving you with the green leaves, which is going to make your lawn and the stripes look so great. Verticut cartridge is the next one, and these are saw blades spaced closely together, and they're sawing into the swards, generating new life out of the stolons, but at the same time cutting into the thatch layer to be able to let drainage go through, encourage new growth. And the material that I've got here, I've got a few plants because I've thinned out the sward, and I've got moss, and I've got brown dead thatch material as well. Right, let's get more aggressive, and here we are with the aggressive guy. This one is the Dethatcher cartridge. Hooked shaped blades spaced widely apart. This is cutting deeper than all the other cartridges at 14mm deep. And when I look at this material, I'm looking at full plants that are in here. I'm looking at soil, as well as the dead material that's being lifted out of the slot and thrown right to the back of the grass box by these hook-shaped blades. The brush so useful, especially at the higher speeds, and the stiffer brush which we can drive with the extra horsepower that we have in the Stirling mower. And this material is strikingly very brown. The actual bristles of the brush don't hook out plants. It doesn't cut into the dirt, so we don't have any soil in here. This is very low density, and there's no plants in here hardly at all, a few leaves, but it's mainly brown material. Finally, the Aerator. This Aerator is the gentlest of the cultivation cartridges. As it goes forward, it pokes small holes into the ground. You'll never know where it's been. You can use this any time of year. It's just not stressing the grass plants out, but helps with getting the water down into the soil through the thatch layer. So I hope with that whole range of equipment here, there's not a situation on your lawn that you're not going to be able to tackle to create great, long-lasting stripes and a healthy lawn.